Xia Dynasty. The Xia Dynasty is traditionally considered the very first dynasty in Chinese history. However, historians are still debating if it actually existed as a real state, or if it's just a legend. That's because, unlike later periods, we haven't found any written records from the Xia people themselves. So in a way, the Xia serves as the origin story for the dynastic system, the idea that a family passes power from father to son. But according to the stories, the last ruler was a tyrant who lost his way, and because he was so terrible to his people, he was overthrown. This set the precedent that a ruler needs to be virtuous, or they will be replaced.
Shang Dynasty. The Shang Dynasty came next, and this is the first one that we know for a fact existed. Unlike the mysterious Xia, the Shang left behind thousands of oracle bones with actual writing on them. This is huge because it gives us the earliest form of Chinese characters, and in terms of craftsmanship, the Shang were absolute masters of bronze. They created massive, detailed vessels that were used for rituals. However, the Shang culture was also pretty brutal by modern standards. They relied heavily on human sacrifice to please their ancestors and gods. Over time, this cruelty made them enemies, so a neighboring state called the Zhao eventually rose up and defeated them. Zhao Dynasty. The Zhao dynasty was the longest-lasting dynasty in all of Chinese history, ruling for about 800 years. Unlike the Shang, who ruled through fear, the Zhao introduced a game-changing idea called the Mandate of Heaven. This meant that the emperor was chosen by the gods to rule, but only as long as he was a good leader. If he became corrupt or if natural disasters struck, it was a sign he had lost the mandate and could be overthrown. This philosophy stabilized the region and became the core of Chinese politics for thousands of years. And this was also the era of famous thinkers like Confucius and Lao Tzu. However, because the empire was so huge, the emperor had to share power with local lords. Eventually, these lords grew too strong and started fighting each other, leading to the Warring States period. It was basically centuries of total chaos where no one was in charge, and that's why the Qin had to step in.
Qin Dynasty. The Qin dynasty was short, it only lasted 15 years, but it was arguably the most important one. Actually, the name China comes from Qin. Unlike the Zhao, where power was split up, the Qin emperor, Qin Shi Huang, wanted total control, so he unified the warring states and standardized everything: the writing, the money, and even the laws. He also connected different local walls to create the first version of the Great Wall. This made the country incredibly organized and unified for the first time. But to achieve this, the Qin were ruthless. They burned books, buried scholars, and forced people into labor. Because of this, the people were miserable and exhausted. So as soon as the first emperor died, the whole thing collapsed immediately.
Han Dynasty. The Han Dynasty took over after the Qin fell, and this is often seen as the golden age of ancient China. So unlike the Qin, who were strict and harsh, the Han kept the unified government, but brought back Confucian morality to make it more humane. This balance created a period of massive stability and growth. And this is when the famous Silk Road was established, allowing China to trade directly with the West. With this, the economy boomed, and the culture flourished. However, just like with any long-running empire, the government eventually became bloated. Powerful families and corrupt officials started fighting for influence. This internal conflict weakened the state, eventually breaking it apart into the famous Three Kingdoms period. Jin Dynasty. The Jin dynasty came right after the chaos of the Three Kingdoms. Unlike the previous era where three warlords were stuck in a stalemate, the Sima family finally managed to reunite everyone under one flag. This was supposed to bring peace back to the land. However, the Jin government was incredibly corrupt, and the princes started fighting each other almost immediately, which is known as the War of the Eight Princes. This civil war left the country wide open to invasion, and because of this weakness, nomadic tribes from the north swept in, forcing the Jin court to flee south. So the country was split in half again, leading to the era of the northern and southern dynasties. Sui Dynasty. The Sui dynasty is often called the Second Qin because it was short. Unlike the chaotic period before it, the Sui emperor united the north and south by force. He knew that to keep the country together, he needed to connect the economy physically. So he ordered the construction of the Grand Canal,
a massive man-made river linking the rice-growing south to the populated north. This project changed China forever, allowing food and soldiers to move instantly across the empire. However, the project killed millions of workers, and 3 failed wars against Korea bankrupted the state. Because of this, the people snapped and revolted, and that's why the Sui fell so quickly, paving the way for the Tang. Tang Dynasty. The Tang Dynasty is famous for being the most cosmopolitan and artistic era. Unlike previous times when China could be a bit isolated, the Tang capital was a bustling global hub filled with merchants, travelers, and religions from all over the world. It was basically the coolest place to be on Earth at the time. And culturally, this was the peak of Chinese poetry, with legends like Li Bai writing masterpieces that are still memorized today. They also expanded the civil service exams, meaning you could get a government job based on your talent, not just who your dad was. However, a massive rebellion called the An Lushan Rebellion devastated the country. Although the dynasty survived, it never fully recovered its former glory, and local military governors began to ignore the emperor. Song Dynasty. The Song Dynasty came later, and unlike the Tang, which was known for its military power, the Song is famous for being an economic powerhouse. This is arguably the most advanced era technologically. Actually, this is when they invented gunpowder, the compass, and movable type printing. Because of this, the economy was massive and the population skyrocketed. And to handle all this trade, they became the first government in the world to issue paper money, because carrying heavy coins was just too impractical. However, despite being rich and smart, the Song had a major weakness. Their military was not that aggressive. This made them a target for northern invaders, and eventually, despite their wealth, they couldn't hold off the Mongols, who swept in and established the Yuan dynasty.
Yuan Dynasty. The Yuan dynasty is unique because it wasn't ruled by Han Chinese at all. The Yuan was established by the Mongols under Kublai Khan. This meant China was now part of the massive Mongol Empire, the largest land empire in history. Because of this, the Silk Road became safer than ever and trade boomed. This is actually when Marco Polo visited. And the Yuan created a new social class system where the Mongols were on top and the locals were on the bottom. However, the Mongols refused to fully integrate or learn the local customs. This created deep resentment among the population. And after a series of floods and plagues, the people saw it as a sign the Mongols had lost the mandate of heaven. So the Red Turban Rebellion broke out, eventually driving them back to the steppes. Ming Dynasty. The Ming Dynasty is probably the one you visualize when you think of traditional China. After the Mongols were pushed out, the Ming wanted to restore Chinese greatness, so they built the Forbidden City in Beijing and finished the massive stone version of the Great Wall that we see today. And early on, they sent massive treasure fleets commanded by Zheng He to explore the oceans. However, over time, the Ming became increasingly isolationist. They stopped the voyages and closed off borders to focus inward. This kept things stable for a while, but it also meant they missed out on the rapid changes happening in the rest of the world. Eventually, famine and rebellion weakened them enough for the Manchus to take over, starting the final chapter, the Qing. Qing Dynasty. The Qing Dynasty was the final chapter of the imperial era. Unlike the Ming, which was ruled by ethnic Han Chinese, the Qing was established by the Manchus from the north. So to rule such a massive population effectively, they adopted traditional Chinese systems while keeping their own military identity. This strategy worked incredibly well for a long time. Actually, under the Qing, China reached its largest territorial size and the population tripled to over 400 million. And the economy was so strong that they exported tea and silk to the whole world. However, the world was changing fast, and the Qing refused to modernize their military or open up trade. This isolation caused them to fall behind the industrializing powers, and after a series of humiliating defeats and internal rebellions, the system finally broke. So in 1911, the dynasty fell, ending over 2,000 years of imperial rule. Thanks for watching, and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this.